everybody, it's Ginger with Marvelous Mouse Travels, and we are here today to do our first ever value resort tour at Disney's Pop Century Resort. So come with us as we check out this awesome place.
Pretty cool.
There are plenty of reasons to be excited to stay at Pop Century because this is a great resort. Being in the value category, it will be one of the least expensive options on property. And yet, as of the time of the making of this video, Pop Century is the only value resort that features queen-size beds in its standard guest rooms. The common spaces feature great pools, fun activities, and larger-than-life theming that pays homage to the pop culture icons of the 20th century. We'll begin our tour of Disney's Pop Century Resort here, in the parking lot just outside of Classic Hall, which is the main shopping, dining, and registration center of the resort. We'll begin by touring this area before making our way here to the 80s and 90s section. We'll stop briefly back by Classic Hall and look at the Hippy Dippy Pool before making our way to the 70s section and touring that. We'll then work in reverse chronological order as we tour the 60s section and end up here in the 50s section. The check-in desk is located immediately to your left as soon as you walk in the lobby, but we actually chose to skip that step by doing online resort check-in. Our first stop in the lobby was this great timeline of memorabilia representing each decade that showcased at Pop Century. These shadow boxes were filled with items that epitomized the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. This monorail game, showcased in the 50s section, was a nod to Disneyland's opening in 1955. Great music, interesting fashions, and historic achievements were showcased in the 60s section. The 70s section was home to platform shoes and disco mania. And of course, no reference to the 70s would be complete without a Star Wars poster. In the 70s section, there was also a whole shadow box dedicated to the opening of Walt Disney World in 1971. Here in the 80s section, we have references to Jazzercise, as well as several great movies including E.T., The Empire Strikes Back, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And of course, there's a He-Man figurine. Having been born in the 80s myself, I remember my mom flipping through department store catalogs just like this when I was a kid. The shadow box was all about the great TV shows of the 80s.
Look at that! Space Invaders! My dad had that. small for the 80s.
It was interesting seeing just how many of the items in this 80s section we actually remembered from our childhoods. And that was even more true of the 90s section. The 90s section was a fun walk down memory lane. I vividly remember watching these movies and TV shows, listening to this music, playing with these toys, and unfortunately, wearing these fashions. Just past the wall of memorabilia and the caricature artist is the Fast Forward arcade at Pop Century. Guess who wished to play the games can purchase a player's card. From the entrance to the arcade, we can look back down the hallway to see everything Pop shopping and dining on our right, and another exit out to the parking lot straight ahead. Just before going out the doors to the parking lot, look to your left to find ATM machines as well as a fuel rod exchange station and phones for guest use. You'll also find posted in the lobby a list of the resort activities offered for each day of your stay. Everything Pop shopping and dining is where you'll find souvenirs as well as the food court at Pop Century. As a collector of mini ears, I was excited to see a great selection here, including these platinum ears as well as these Mickey Premium Bar ears I've had my eye on for a while. We were at Disney World during Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party, so of course there were Halloween ears, decorations, clothing, and other souvenirs that you could pick up. There were also a lot of pins to choose from, which made my children, who are avid pin collectors, very happy. If you're a collector of keychains, I think you'll be very happy with the selection here. I know my kids were.
I think I'll have.
This Mickey Waffle keychain definitely came home with us. There was also a really nice selection of Pop Century branded merchandise. One of my favorite elements of theming were these great retro TVs stacked on top of each other. In the food court section of Everything Pop, you can see that there's ample seating, as well as several different options of quick service locations to choose from.
This place is amazing. Look at this, Daddy. So wide open.
You can find the famous Mickey Premium Bar right here in the ice cream freezer at Everything Pop. And it, along with several of the other items we're about to feature, are Disney Dining Plan snack credit eligible. Everything Pop is known for this tie-dye cheesecake, which is also Disney Dining Plan snack credit eligible. By far, our favorite meal at Everything Pop was the bounty platter that we enjoyed for breakfast. All four of us split 2 of them, and it was plenty of food. There's also a pressed penny machine in Everything Pop's food court for those of you who are collectors. Rooms at Pop Century come in 2 broad categories: standard and preferred. Preferred rooms are going to be closer to the main hall as well as the bus stop, and standard rooms are going to be a little bit more of a walk. For both standard and preferred categories, you can choose a standard view or a pool view. For this particular stay, we booked a standard pool view room, which was located in the 80 section. Our room had 2 queen beds, but there are rooms at Pop Century in every category that offer king-size beds. Our room was very clean when we first arrived, and even though it was small, it was well appointed and laid out in such a way that made it very comfortable for us to stay there, even though we were a party of 4. There was great storage and attention to detail, and there's even a coffee maker, which isn't offered at every value resort at Disney. There's also a refrigerator for those of you who might need to refrigerate medications or other food items. One of the coolest features of this room was this fold-away bed, which can become a table whenever you're not needing to use it as a bed. There's also several different options for charging your technological devices. Like all value resorts, the bathroom at Pop Century features 1 sink. The sliding door offers a little extra privacy for those who want to get ready while others are still sleeping. There's also a sliding door separating the water closet from the rest of the bathroom. Now we're going to show you how to unfold this awesome bed. And just like that, you have 2 comfortable beds all ready to go. The housekeeping service at Pop Century arranged my children's toys on their bed for them, and we also put some of their plushes out in the window. This is a common thing done at Disney resorts. People will decorate their windows to get them in the mood to go and have fun at the parks. The larger-than-life theming at the value resorts is almost always fun for kids, and my kids were no different. They loved staying in the 80s section and seeing the huge statue of Roger Rabbit, the Walkman, as well as the keyboard at the computer pool. It was a really fun environment for them, and when it came time for us to check out, they didn't want to leave.
This is the back of the pool house, so it's supposed to look like a computer processor. There's a floppy disk eject drive. Floppy disk drive, I mean. Floppy disks.
This laptop is actually on the outside of the 90s building. And much like the 80s and 90s overlapped culturally, the same is true for how they're represented at this resort. Here on the laptop screen, you can see references to the opening of Animal Kingdom in 1998. The computer screen even lights up at night. The buildings in the 80s and 90s sections are covered with catchphrases that were common to those decades, such as whatever for the 90s and to the max for the 80s. But you'll also find a lot of other pop culture icons represented. For instance, the outsides of the stairwells in the 90s buildings are covered with cell phones. The stairwells on the 80s buildings are covered with giant Rubik's Cubes, which look awesome when they're lit up at night. As you can see here, the 70s section of the resort has their stairwells decorated with 8 tracks. But we're going to come back to the 70s section in just a second. Before we tour that, let's go back to the main hall and take a little bit of a closer look at some of the decorations there. The main themed pool for the resort is the Hippy Dippy Pool, which is located right outside the Classic Hall and is themed after the 1960s. As you can see, there's a lot of fun to be had at the pool. We'll come back and tour this awesome 60s section later. For now, let's make our way over to the 70s. There are several centers in the 70s section where you can gather to play the classic board game Twister. The 70s section is all about childhood nostalgia, as you feel like you're standing in the middle of a giant foosball table, looking up at a larger-than-life Mickey phone and big wheel. Mood rings and platform shoes adorn the outside of the buildings. There's also a playground area for kids in the 70s section. There are names of songs written on the backs of these huge 8-tracks that are right next to the stairwells. From this bench outside one of the 70s buildings, you have a beautiful view across Hourglass Lake to another great value resort, Art of Animation. Check back for our tour of that resort in an upcoming video. Walking along this path will take us from the 70s section directly into the 60s section. As you can see, the stairwells of these buildings are covered with gigantic yo-yos. And eventually, these buildings will have a great view and easy access into the Skyliner station, which will be located in Hourglass Lake, directly between Art of Animation and Pop Century. Popular Disney movies, as well as toys from the 1960s, are showcased in this section. And as mentioned earlier, the 60s section is also home to the Hippy Dippy Pool. Right next to the 60s section, and to your right if you're walking out of Classic Hall, you'll find the 1950s section. Records, transistor radios, and references to doo-wop adorn the exteriors of the 50s buildings. You also see references to one of the most popular Disney movies of the 1950s, Lady and the Tramp. From this angle, you can see Lady looking into her doghouse. The pool in the 1950 section is the bowling pool and is shaped like a giant bowling pin. The restrooms and laundry facilities look like the shoe racks at a bowling alley. One of my favorite theming elements at the resort was this giant jukebox. Now that we've toured each of the sections of the resort, let's take a closer look at that bridge connecting Pop Century and Art of Animation. As mentioned earlier, this bridge is eventually going to give access to the Disney Skyliner station at these two resorts. The Disney Skyliner will give one more option for transportation to guests staying in this particular resort area, and it's going to be pretty exciting to see the Skyliner system taking shape over the next few months. I hope you've enjoyed our tour of Disney's Pop Century Resort. There are a lot of perks that come with staying on property at Disney, including complimentary transportation to the theme parks, water parks, and Disney Springs, extra time in the parks, and an earlier FastPass Plus booking window, just to name a few. Staying at a value property like Pop Century enables you to take advantage of all of this at a lower price point. Of all the value properties I've stayed at, Pop Century is easily my favorite. Again, I'm Ginger with Marvelous Mouse Travels. Thank you for watching.